Okay, we're going to go ahead and get our workshop started this afternoon regarding District Rule 4460, Petroleum Refinery Fence Line Monitoring, and District Rule 3200, Petroleum Refinery Community Air Monitoring Fees. Before we start the workshop and the presentation, just wanted to read some Zoom instructions for you all who are participating via Zoom. So we have staff members participating in person here and via Zoom video teleconference. We will do our best to facilitate a smooth meeting with public participation via Zoom video and audio teleconference. Before we begin, I want to review some important guidelines and general instructions for the meeting. Please silence your cell and desk phones. This will ensure that we do not hear any feedback that can interrupt the meeting. Only district staff will be visible via Zoom. Members of the public are asked to unmute themselves when they are recognized to make a public comment. After the presentation, staff will announce the public comment period has opened, and staff will recognize any public attendee who has indicated they wish to speak. On the Zoom video application, please press raise hand button at the bottom of your screen so that you may be recognized to speak, and please be sure to unmute yourself. If you are participating by Zoom phone conference, please press *9 to raise your hand so that you may be recognized to speak, and staff will call the last four digits of your phone number when it is your turn to speak. Be sure to press *6 to unmute and mute yourself. Written comments may also be sent to the email address of webcast@valliere.org. The mailbox will be monitored during the workshop, and comments received will be read aloud by staff during the public comment period. So if we can go ahead and call up the presentation, we can get things started this afternoon. Just wanted to introduce myself first. I'm John Klassen. I'm the Director of Air Quality Science here at the Air District. I'm joined by Chai Tao, Air Monitoring Program Manager, and Molly Boyette, Air Quality Specialist. We're going to walk you through the details of where we are in our evaluation of potential amendments to these two rules and give you some more details based on the evaluation we've been doing since our last meeting. A little bit of background on what we want to talk about this afternoon. We want to give you some background on AB 1647, the implementation of that across the state and in the Valley, where these requirements came from. Give you some background on state-provided refinery air monitoring guidance and recommendations for different chemicals that could be monitored at refineries, potential health effects, and technology considerations. We want to give an overview of the Valley's refineries that are operating in the area, current regulations that apply to them, some background on the Hotspots program, and the emissions inventories that represent those facilities. We'll then walk you through some details of where we are now in our evaluation of Rules 4460 and 3200. Give you some details on what we're thinking for the potential amendments to those rules regarding exemptions that could be removed, the submitted air monitoring plans that would be required according to new guidance that would be developed along with Rule 4460, and the monitoring requirements, how that would be based on a thorough site-specific analysis, and then a few details on the next steps in our rule evaluation process. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Molly Boyette to give us a little more background on this evaluation process.
Thanks, John. So Assembly Bill 1647 was signed by the Governor of California on October 8, 2017. It was created due to safety incidents at large refineries in Bay Area and South Coast. It requires petroleum refineries to develop, install, operate, and maintain a fence line air monitoring system at and near the refineries in accordance to guidance developed by CARB and the local air district. It requires air districts develop, install, operate, and maintain a refinery-related community air monitoring system, and it requires that real-time data be made accessible to the public from both of these systems. So the district adopted Rule 4460 and Rule 3200 in December of 2019 through a public process to implement the requirements of AB 1647. So the current District Rule 4460 requires refineries to install, operate, and maintain a fence line air monitoring system and make the data collected by the system publicly available. It exempts refineries not currently engaged in refining crude oil, and the requirements for the monitoring systems are based on a facility's crude oil processing capacity, shown in the table here. Refineries with a processing capacity of less than 40,000 barrels per day are required to use point monitoring or open path systems to monitor 6 compounds. And those with a capacity of 40,000 barrels per day or greater are required to utilize open path systems with point monitoring as needed to monitor the list of 18 compounds. As mandated by AB 1647, Rule 3200 recovers the district's cost of developing and maintaining the refinery-related community air monitoring system, and the community monitoring approach and fees is based on establishing a community air monitoring station with a variety of sensors that measure a range of possible pollutants and parameters. So the reasons for the proposed amendments we're discussing today is because of a recent Fresno County Superior Court ruling in September of 2021 that provides additional clarification on statutory requirements under AB 1647. The issues that need to be addressed include the removal of exemption for affected petroleum facilities not currently engaged in refining crude oil, and a reevaluation and additional supporting analysis with respect to monitoring provisions for petroleum refineries with a refining capacity of less than 40,000 barrels per day, which currently requires the monitoring for those 6 specific pollutants. In response to this court order, the district is conducting a public process to develop amendments and additional technical analysis for Rule 4460 and Rule 3200. So in developing the guidance for these systems, AB 1647 requires the district to take into account monitoring technological capabilities, input from affected parties, and to the extent feasible, the guidance prepared by the state should also be taken into consideration, including the Refinery Emergency Air Monitoring Assessment Report, or the REMAR, prepared by the California Air Resources Board and California Air Pollution Control Officers Association, as well as the Office of Environmental Health Hazard Assessment, or Oija Report, analysis of refinery chemical emissions and health effects, published in September of 2017. The Reema Report provides an inventory of emergency air monitoring assets and capabilities for refineries in California and provides recommendations to improve emergency and routine air monitoring at refineries in surrounding communities. The recommendations cover air monitoring technology, modeling, and coordination, and it advises that implementing best practices does not imply a one-size-fits-all solution for refinery air monitoring. Recognizing the variability among refineries, implementation of each recommended strategy in the REMAR must be suited to each facility's size, operations, specific location, and its surrounding receptors, keeping in mind the practical limitations of current and emerging technologies and the timeframes necessary for full implementation. The Oija Report presents a list of chemicals emitted from California refineries and identifies 18 candidates for air monitoring, taking into account emissions levels and toxicity. Those 18 are displayed here on this slide. It also noted that sulfur dioxide, hydrogen sulfide, and hydrocarbons were the most commonly reported chemicals emitted during refinery incidents. So to make this assessment, Oija compiled a list of 188 chemicals emitted from all California refineries, taking into account their emissions during routine operations as well as incidents, and those chemicals that are rarely emitted as well. They ranked these chemicals based on the average level of emissions from refineries statewide, their involvement in multiple refinery processes and incidences, as well as the EPA's inhalation toxicity scores for individual chemicals. And from that ranking, they identified 18 candidates for air monitoring based on the amount of emissions and toxicity considerations. So AB 1647 applies to all petroleum refineries in California. There are 5 California air districts with refineries in their jurisdiction, shown on this slide. The refineries vary in size and processing capacity, as well as their operations. And this slide shows the difference in processing capacity at these refineries. As you can see in the chart on the right, the Valley has much smaller refineries as compared to the South Coast and the Bay Area. The largest in South Coast processing up to 363,000 barrels per day. The largest in Bay Area processing up to 245,000 barrels per day. And compared to the San Joaquin Valley, the largest refinery processing up to 66,000 barrels per day. The 5 California air districts with refineries in their jurisdiction have taken different approaches to implement the requirements of AB 1647. Most have adopted a rule to establish requirements for fence line monitoring, except for San Luis Obispo County, who opted to establish an MOU with the 1 refinery in their district. This slide shows the pollutants required for monitoring in each of the districts. And for comparison, the first column shows Oija's recommended pollutants, and then the district's current Rule 4460 requirements. The pollutants are required, are the same as the ones required in the South Coast for refineries with a processing capacity above 40,000 barrels per day. However, the district's rule includes monitoring requirements for facilities with a capacity of less than 40,000 barrels per day, while South Coast exempts facilities of that size. Bay Area requires refineries to monitor a minimum of BTEX, hydrogen sulfide, and sulfur dioxide, and requires consideration of several other compounds. And San Luis Obispo and Santa Barbara counties, with just one refinery each, develop smaller listed pollutants more specific to their facilities. As marked in the table, some refineries are allowed to exclude certain pollutants from monitoring with sufficient justification in their plans. So this table shows what refineries in California actually identified for monitoring in their current plans. The second column reiterates what we went over on the previous slide, showing the pollutants required by each district. Then the table shows each refinery subject to monitoring requirements within each district, their processing capacity, and what pollutants they actually identified for monitoring in their plans. The refineries in South Coast generally elected to monitor the full list of pollutants except for hydrogen fluoride where it was not used. And the Bay Area refineries provided justification in their plans to exclude certain pollutants from monitoring or to use a surrogate. San Joaquin Valley, San Luis Obispo, and Santa Barbara refineries identified the pollutants that were required of them. There are 4 facilities in the San Joaquin Valley that are classified as petroleum refineries. Alon, Bakersfield, Renewable Fuels, and Tricor Refining are not currently refining crude oil, and so they are exempt from the current rule. However, Alon does have fence line monitoring in place as a condition of a county use permit, and they are monitoring ammonia, H2S, and hydrocarbons. The real-time data from the system is available on their website. The 2 refineries subject to monitoring requirements under current Rule 4460 are Kern Oil and San Joaquin Refining, and they have current monitoring plans that identify BTEX, H2S, and SO2 for monitoring as required. And now I will pass this over to Chai to go into the regulations these refineries are subject to.
All right, thank you, Molly. So in addition to refinery fence line air monitoring, the refineries here in the Valley are subject to multiple district rules that have been shown to be the most stringent rules feasible for implementation. In addition, there's subject to a variety of performance standards under local, state, federal, and state and federal regulations to reduce air pollutants. And this includes continuously monitoring for leaks, ongoing reporting requirements, regular district inspections to ensure compliance, and also various federal new source performance standards applied to new and modified equipment at refineries. And as you can see here, there's several standards, performance standards for refineries, including storage vessels, gasoline terminals, wastewater systems from refineries, and leaks at petroleum refineries. And in addition to that, these Valley petroleum refineries are also subject to district regulations, including, as you can see through this very long list here, from new source review to visual emissions to nuisance to flares that are being operated there, to leaks and from the potential leaks from the facility to storage of liquids, organic liquids there, transfer of organic liquids and internal combustion engines at the petroleum refineries. In addition to that, the refineries here in the Valley are also subject to the Air Toxic Hotspots Act, also known as AB 2588. And under this state law, it requires these refineries to report and assess, and the district to assess the toxic emissions at these stationary sources. In addition to that, this process is a very conservative state-established risk screening, uses a very conservative state-established risk screening methodology. And recently, this assessment has been done for Alon, Bakersfield Renewable Fuels, San Joaquin Refining, and Tricor, and has been determined that these refineries are not posing any significant risk. As for Kern Oil and Refining, the district is still in the process of assessing that refinery for the air toxics hotspots. And so, as part of that requirement, they're required to provide emissions data to the district. And so, this is the emissions inventory for all four refineries here in the valley. What we're showing here is the OEA recommended pollutants for monitoring, and what the emissions are in pounds per year, as you can see through this list here. If you'd like to see the entire inventory, we also have that available, and that is posted on our website at the public notice area where we have the public notice on this posted. So you can access it from there. And so we've shown the list of pollutants. That's the quantity associated with 18 pollutants that OEA recommended for monitoring consideration. We should also look at the air monitoring technology that's available, and these are some of the considerations that we should think about. So one is the type of air monitoring equipment. So there are point monitoring equipment. Basically, it takes air samples at a single location and determines the concentration level of that particular pollutant. And then there's also equipment types that are capable of monitoring where you have two locations and it creates a path. Any type of pollutants that go through that path, they can detect the concentration levels for that. And so those are called open path monitoring. It covers a wider area. And we should also consider the varying capabilities of these air monitoring equipment. Some of them are able to detect very low limits where others are not as capable of that. And then there are certain equipment that are capable of monitoring for multiple pollutants in one unit, whereas some are just a single unit that's able to monitor just a single pollutant. And then there are some pollutants that can only be measured through sampling. There is no real-time monitoring for it, where basically you have to take the air sample, collect it into a canister, and send it to a laboratory to analyze, or collect it through a filter sample and send that to a laboratory for analyzing. And then in addition to that, there may be certain pollutants that may not have any monitoring methodology available or established for it yet. Now, these equipment, there's varying maintenance requirements. Some of them require significant routine maintenance. And then there's a broad range of costs as well, from $17,000–$18,000 to $500,000 and up. And so right now, these are the type of, if we look at the OEA recommended pollutants for monitoring, in this second column here, you can see that as far as real-time monitoring that's currently capable or in use of monitoring these type of pollutants, these are checked here. As you can see, these are available for real-time monitoring, and there are some of them that do not have the check mark in there. For example, like nickel and manganese, these are metals, so there are no real-time monitoring available for it. And then there's like diethanolamine. For that one, there is no methodology that's currently available for measuring that. So with that said, and the background that we had talked about, we have some potential amendments that we'd like to share with you all on this, recognizing that there's a lot of variability between refineries, and also to be consistent with Reema recommendations. We are looking at an approach that would require a site-specific analysis, and we believe that will be a more health protective approach that's consistent and more stringent than other air district approaches. So we're looking at removing exemptions for facilities not currently refining crude oil. So the rule will apply to all facilities classified as petroleum refineries. So that will affect 4 facilities here in the valley. We're looking at removing the list of predetermined pollutants and requirements based on facility processing capacity. So that's what Molly had talked about earlier, where we had the 40,000 barrels per day processing rate, and with different types of requirements for pollutants that need to be monitored. So we're looking at requiring facilities to monitor all of the OEA recommended pollutants, and also to consider other pollutants that the facilities, the refineries may be emitting. and will require refineries to submit the monitoring plan in accordance with Rule 4460 guidelines. And so this will be a new guideline that we will be developing, and I'll be talking about that a little bit more in detail in the next slide. And in addition to that, we are also looking to update the community air monitoring fees depending on the changes for Rule 4460. And so those fees are in Rule 3200. And so for the potential Rule 4460 guideline, we're looking at having this guideline include the requirements for fence line monitoring plans with a very site-specific analysis. So in here, we'll have the requirements for facilities to monitor, again, all OEA recommended pollutants and consider any pollutants emitted by the facility as well. Requiring facilities to provide sufficient justification if they feel that there's certain pollutants that they do not need to monitor or should be excluded from their monitoring system. So the reasons for this would be, one, the facility in its operations just simply does not emit that particular compound. Or for that particular compound, there is no monitoring technology available yet for it. Or if they do an analysis, a modeling analysis to demonstrate that the concentration level of that particular pollutant at the fence line would be well below the detection levels of available monitoring technology, then those could be sufficient justifications for not monitoring any specific compound. And we'll also ensure that the monitoring information is provided to the public in real time for all of these facilities. And as far as for this particular guideline, it will be developed concurrently along with this rule development process. And the draft guidelines will be made available for public comment along with the draft rule, and will be presented to the governing board for consideration of approval at the same time that we're taking the rule for adoption. As far as timeline, we're looking at following the requirements of the existing Rule 4460, which is basically the petroleum refineries must submit a new or revised fence line plan 6 months from adoption of the amended rule. Then the plan should be made available for public review 30 days before approval. And if the plan is disapproved, then the revised plan is due 30 days after notification of disapproval. And once the plan is approved, it must be implemented within 1 year from the approval date. So for our next steps, so we're looking at continuing our ongoing community engagement in this, in the designing and implementing and communication of the air monitoring essentials. And in terms of the time frame, we had a scoping meeting on February 1st of this year, and so the next one is the public workshop, which is today, and we're looking at having another public workshop in June, and then in the third quarter, we are hoping to do the publication of the proposed rule and to take it to the district governing board for adoption. And throughout this entire process, we definitely welcome public participation and comments. And if you have any further questions or comments, please forward them to Molly Boyette, and here's the contact information. And if you would also, if you have not signed up yet, you can sign up on our webpage to get updates of on our listserv of any of these updates that we have regarding petroleum refineries and changes in rules. And now we will open it up for comments and questions.
And just a reminder too, for those of you listening, if you want to also send in your comment or question to webcast@valeair.org, we'll be able to see that here in the inbox, and we can read that for everybody to hear what your comment is.
Our first comment is from Jasmine.
Hi, good afternoon. great to hear some of the updates coming out of the rulemaking process so far. One question that I did have is you mentioned that a potential amendment is to remove the exemption for facilities not refining crude oil. And what was the number again of how many more facilities would be under monitoring requirements with the exemption removed?
Yeah, so currently we have two, with the current rule, there's two that's subject to the rule, and if we remove that, potentially get an additional two more, so for a total of 4 facilities.
Thank you. And one more question, with the current oil and refining assessment, do you have any idea of when the assessment will be done? And also you mentioned that it was a reassessment, so I'm just curious if there was an initial assessment and what the results were from it, if there is one.
Yeah, I believe we did have the initial assessment. And as far as when this new one will be completed, I am not exactly sure when that will be completed. We're still in the process of working on that and working with the facility to get all the necessary information. As far as the last assessment, I believe they were considered an intermediate, which means not significant impact.
And one more question, just in terms of the monitoring systems that you're using, is there a time frame that the district conducts these assessments? And if so, are they announced or unannounced to the refineries?
Are you talking about the monitoring?
Yes.
So if you're talking about the monitoring, that's an ongoing monitoring that we, for example, like for Kern Oil refining, they have their fence line monitoring. So that's up and running. It's available on their website. You can sign up to receive notifications. And we also have the community monitoring for that as well. That's in the Mountain View Middle School in Lamont, and that's running continuously. And the information is available. The real-time readings are available on our website as well.
Actually, I do have a follow-up question to that. So thank you for clarifying. And one question about the continuous monitoring. So there is a site that it's currently happening at, and if any of the refineries are switching to a different monitoring system, will there be reconsideration of the location that the monitoring is happening at now? And also, how did the original site kind of be chosen? Do you picture or envision any changes to any of the current monitoring sites?
Yeah, we'll go through that review as we go through this process and get the rule. I think once we finalize Rule 4460 onto what the changes are, then we'll also have to take that into consideration of how it impacts the community monitoring.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Our next comment is from Matthew.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm with Bakersfield Renewable Fuels, and the exemption currently is in the law and regulation about not currently engaged in crude refining. So is the intent of the law eventually, even after modification, is for the facilities who does refine crude oil? Because we are not planning to refine any crude oil in the future. So I was wondering if that's the intent of the law for crude refining only, and therefore we can discuss possibility of getting out of the requirements.
Yeah, so the requirement will be that all petroleum refineries will be subject to the monitoring. And if you have the capability to refine petroleum, then you would be subject to the rule. John, if you want to add.
Yeah, and just to expand on that too. Yeah, so what we're considering for the exemption, like right now, facilities not refining crude oil are exempt, so that would change where if that's removed, then any petroleum refinery would then fall within the requirements of the rule. But if some facilities are transitioning from petroleum refining to some other process, we'll be evaluating that and what these requirements are. I know that some facilities could be considering doing that, so we'll keep in touch and walk through that process as different facilities could be changing their operations.
Thank you.
Okay, and just checking the webcast inbox, I don't see any questions or comments through the webcast. Okay, go ahead.
Our next comment is from Brian.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. My name is Byron Chan. I'm an attorney at Earth Justice. Thank you so much to staff for the presentation. I'm curious if the monitoring technology right now seems to be divided according to the refining capacity of the facility between point monitors or open path monitors. With the removal of the exemption, I'm wondering if that will affect the monitoring technologies that refiners will have to install.
Yeah, good question. We're considering that. You're right. In the current rule, there's a bit of a different description on the type of equipment that could be used above or below 40,000 barrels per day. And what we're thinking with the next amendment of this rule is we could leave it a little more open where refineries can look at the air monitoring technologies that are available, look at the pollutants that are being considered, and what type of equipment is most reasonable to use to monitor those pollutants. So they'll have to describe that in their monitoring plans. Of course, we would review that here at the Air District. That would be open for public comment as well when those plans are put together to receive public comment, and that would all be described and expressed in those fence line air monitoring plans.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no more public comment and no other questions in the webcast email inbox, I think we'll go ahead and close the workshop for this afternoon. To those of you who tuned in, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to our updates. Please stay in touch with us in the process. Look at the contact slide. If you have questions, please get in touch with Molly. Give us an email, sign up for the listserv so you get more updates as we have future workshops or post more information. Thank you again for your involvement and have a great rest of your evening. Thank you.